Remember when Sylvester Stallone jogged past the Italian market, drank raw eggs, and thundered up those museum steps? Behind Mickey's growl and Apollo's entrance hides a guerrilla production mortgaged on two men's homes. Today we're counting down 20 weird facts you never knew about Rocky. Number 20. You have seen this moment 100 times. Rocky jogging through Philadelphia's Italian market, the city alive around him, and a vendor tossing an orange that he catches mid-stride without breaking pace. It feels effortless, spontaneous, like the whole city was in on the routine. Here is the thing, that vendor had absolutely no idea he was in a movie. The entire training montage was filmed guerrilla style without permits on a live Saturday morning in South Philly. Director John G. Avildsen, Sylvester Stallone, and Steadicam inventor Garrett Brown moved through the market as a skeleton crew, with Brown carrying the rig himself through live foot traffic. When the vendor tossed that orange and Stallone caught it on instinct, Avildsen kept rolling. Stopping to reset the shot would have required redirecting the crowd, which would have instantly exposed the unpermitted shoot. So the take lived. And because it lived, the montage has a texture that no amount of controlled extras could have manufactured. Every merchant you see in that sequence is a real person, doing a real morning of work with no idea they were becoming part of a film that would win Best Picture. Watch the faces in the background next time. Nobody is performing, nobody is even slightly curious about the camera. Because nobody knows it is there, that kind of authenticity cannot be staged. But while the market scenes were unplanned, the film's most quoted line has an even stranger secret. Number 19. Here is something that will genuinely mess with your head. The phrase everyone quotes from Rocky, "Yo, Adrian, I did it," does not appear in the 1976 film. Not once. That line belongs to Rocky II, released in 1979. In the original, after 15 brutal rounds, Stallone simply cries, "Adrian, Adrian," into the chaos of the ring. The elongated, triumphant "I did it" came 3 years later. The AFI placed Yo, Adrian in their 100 Years, 100 Movie Quotes countdown, which helped cement the confusion. And Talia Shire's face responding to that broken call is so completely associated with the franchise that audiences folded both films into one emotional memory. It is genuinely one of the most successful misattributions in film history. What makes the original cry so powerful, though, is that it was not polished. The climax was a last-minute reshoot. Added after test screenings showed audiences deflating at the original ending. There was no rehearsal buffer, no time to refine the delivery. Stallone committed to rawness because the production conditions demanded it. The emotion you hear is unguarded, because there was no other option. Think about that the next time you watch the ring scene. The line the whole world quotes is from a different movie. The moment that actually exists in the 1976 film is rawer, messier, and somehow even more affecting. And the cast member who ended up being most central to that moment also came with a personal connection nobody expected. Number 18. The massive bull mastiff that Rocky walks through South Philadelphia is not a hired animal. That is, Butkus Stallone, Sylvester Stallone's actual pet, named after Chicago Bears linebacker Dick Butkus. Some prints of the film even credit him as Butkus Stallone. He was not trained for film work, he had no handlers on standby, and he cost the production nothing in animal fees. On a budget of approximately $1 million, those savings were not trivial. Casting a personal pet eliminated kennel costs, trainer fees, and the scheduling complexity that comes with professional animal wranglers. But the real impact was on the footage itself. Because Butkus had no stage training, he moved at his own pace. That lumbering, unhurried gait dictated the jogging rhythm in several early montage shots. Stallone had to match the dog, not the other way around. Stallone wrote scenes around Butkus's actual behavior because that was the only way to make them work. What looks like a character choice, Rocky moving slow and deliberate through his neighborhood, is partly an accommodation to a 140-pound dog who was not taking direction from anyone. And here is the piece of that story that most people miss. Every scene Butkus appears in carries the weight of something real. He was not cast, he was brought, he was already part of Stallone's life before any camera ever rolled. That personal dimension quietly shapes every frame he is in. And Stallone did not stop there with the personal touches. Number 17. Watch the timekeeper at the championship fight, the man responsible for clanging the bell between rounds of the Apollo vs. Rocky bout. That is Frank Stallone Sr., Sylvester's father, and the a cappella doo-wop singer performing Take You Back early in the film, the one who briefly locks eyes with Rocky on the corner, is Frank Stallone Jr., Sylvester's brother. Frank Jr. also wrote the song himself. Stallone reportedly turned down 5 earlier tracks his brother submitted before approving Take You Back. The song had to earn its place. But once it was in, so was Frank Jr., and between the two family members, an entire corner of the production was staffed by people Stallone had known his entire life. First wife Sasha Zach also worked on the film, uncredited as still photographer. Composer Bill Conti was separately scoring everything else, but the texture of the film's early Philadelphia scenes carries a Stallone family handwriting throughout. This was partly practical. Family casting on a 28-day shoot meant scale pay, no agent negotiations, instant availability, and total reliability. On a production moving this fast with this little money, those were not small advantages. They were survival tools. But there is something else to it. Rocky is a film about a man whose whole world is his immediate circle, his trainer, his girlfriend, his neighborhood. The production reflected that. The real Stallone family built the fictional one. The next question is, who built the shot that made it all iconic? Number 16. The moment Rocky reaches the top of the Philadelphia Museum of Art steps and the camera spins around him in that full 360-degree arc, arms up, the city spread below. Gonna fly now, hitting its peak. That shot exists because of a piece of technology that was barely weeks old. Rocky was only the third feature film in history to use the Steadicam, following Bound for Glory and Marathon Man. The rig was operated by its inventor, Garrett Brown, who had built it and was still learning what it could do in real conditions. Director of photography James Crabe, ASC, later told American Cinematographer that Brown's steps footage was the only really substantial handheld footage that appears in the picture. Everything else was locked down or conventionally mounted. Director John G. Avildsen had discovered the Steadicam through Brown's demo reel, which happened to feature Brown's then-girlfriend running those exact same museum steps. Avildsen watched the reel and immediately called Brown to ask where those stairs were. The answer led him to Philadelphia, and the shot that became the visual language for cinematic triumph. Before the Steadicam, a shot like that would have required a crane, a dolly track, or a static wide. None of those options produce the floating, intimate momentum that makes the step sequence feel like flight. Notice how the camera floats rather than bobs. That smoothness was genuinely new in 1976, and the morning of the shoot, it nearly did not happen at all. Number 15. The Steadicam had been dropped before the Philadelphia shoot. In the cold January air, the prototype would not power on. The production had no backup rig, no alternate camera plan, and no budget for an additional shooting day. What it did have was someone creative enough to reach for the nearest solution, which turned out to involve car batteries. Someone ran alongside Garrett Brown the entire length of the climb, carrying 2 car batteries connected by jumper cables to keep the camera alive. Brown has recounted this in interviews with the Tiffin Company, the Steadicam manufacturer, and in CBS News coverage. That runner is the reason the shot exists. Without the improvised power solution, the steps run would have been filmed with a conventional shoulder mount or abandoned entirely. Think about what we would have lost. The floaty, weightless ascent that makes Rocky's triumph feel earned rather than mechanical. The spin at the top that puts the city in the frame. All of it rested on a pair of jumper cables and a crew member willing to sprint up 72 stone steps while carrying automotive equipment. This is the scene where independent filmmaking meets new technology. Gaffer tape engineering literally preserved a moment that film schools now study as one of the great innovations in location cinematography. The solution was irrational. The result was permanent. And if that improvisation held the steps together, another scene almost came apart for an even simpler reason. Number 14. Rocky and Adrian on the ice for their first date, completely alone except for the rink attendant threatening to kick them off in 10 minutes for $10. The empty ice, the Zamboni humming in the background, the awkward silence between two people who have no idea how to be around each other. It is one of the most intimate scenes in the film, and it exists entirely because the production ran out of money. Stallone's original script called for 300 extras filling a busy public rink. When the crew arrived to shoot, the producers delivered the news that those extras were no longer in the budget. Director John G. Avildsen suggested staging it in a closed rink instead. Stallone rewrote the scene that same day, adding the bribed attendant and the Zamboni into the dialogue to explain why the ice was deserted. A planned Philadelphia location also collapsed during a Teamsters dispute, and the scene moved to the Ice Capade Chalet in Santa Monica. Talia Shire later credited Stallone for making that crisis disappear on the page. The budget failure produced the only setting where 2 socially terrified people could actually talk. A full rink would have required them to perform. An empty rink required them to exist. That distinction is everything. There is no establishing crowd shot in the scene. There never could have been. The scene you love was built on the ruins of a scene that fell apart. Number 13. Rocky's apartment looks like Philadelphia. The crumbling plaster, the sagging furniture, the window overlooking a wall of bare brick. It feels rooted in Kensington in the working-class grid of South Philly row houses. The exterior is real. The building at 1818 East Tusculum Street in Philadelphia is exactly what it looks like. But the interior was shot in a cramped downtown Los Angeles room, and the brick wall outside the window was built by the production because the actual Los Angeles view did not match. The entire film was made in 28 days beginning January 9, 1976, moving between Philadelphia exteriors and Los Angeles interiors and gyms. Director of photography James Crabe described the Los Angeles apartment in American Cinematographer as having sagging floors in a really crummy part of downtown. He pushed his interior photography one full stop and worked at f4.5 with photo floods to hold the desaturated, low-contrast look he had established in Philadelphia. The two-city stitch is invisible. Every visual decision across both coasts reinforced a single world, and Crabe's consistency of eye is the reason nobody ever noticed they were watching two cities edited into one neighborhood. But look past Rocky the next time he stands at that window. Those bricks are set dressing. They were put there because a Los Angeles view would have broken the illusion. The fake became the authentic, and if the apartment was assembled from borrowed pieces, so was the gym where Rocky trained. Number 12. The building at 2147 N Front Street in the Kensington neighborhood of Philadelphia has never in its history been a boxing gym. Not before Rocky, not during it, and not after. Every painted sign, every worn banner, and every red boxing glove mural you see on that exterior was hand-applied and deliberately aged by the art department. Production designer William J. Cassidy built the entire visual mythology of Mighty Mix from scratch on a building that had no boxing history whatsoever. The crew used paint and grime to make it look like the gym had been there for decades. The same banner was reused in an even more weathered state for Rocky II. The building has since been redeveloped into a brewery. But for one shooting day in January 1976, it became one of the most recognizable fictional gyms in cinema. All the interior gym scenes were filmed 2,700 miles away at Main Street Gym in Skid Row, Los Angeles, where Stallone actually trained for the role. Two buildings on opposite coasts were intercut as a single location, and audiences have been watching that cut for nearly 50 years without registering the geography. The boxing gloves above the front door are too perfectly weathered. They were painted to look that way. The distressing is too even, too deliberate. Once you know it, you can see the art department's hand in every surface. Number 11. The championship fight between Rocky and Apollo looks like a sold-out arena. The Grand Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles appears to be packed to capacity, with a roaring crowd filling every seat. The reality is that on most filming days, the building was nearly empty. There were days when as few as 50 extras were on hand for a venue that holds thousands. Art director James H. Spencer's solution was to kill every house light except the ones directly above the ring, then string Christmas lights halfway up the empty seats to simulate the glow of an occupied crowd. Extras were moved repeatedly across lit entrance concourses to create the illusion of constant motion in the background. Director John G. Avildsen added another layer of complexity by shooting the fight in reverse round order. Round 15 was filmed first, with Stallone and Carl Weathers in full prosthetic makeup. They worked backward through the rounds, so the wounds and swelling naturally decreased as the edit moved forward through the fight. Editors Richard Halsey and Scott Conrad had to construct coherent continuity from footage shot in reverse chronology. They won the Academy Award for film editing. Past the second row of seats, those crowd lights are Christmas tree bulbs. The roar you hear is the production sound department earning its fees. And the editing team that won an Oscar did so by solving a double problem, fooling the eye on coverage and on continuity at the same time. All right, we're at the halfway mark, and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 10, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite Rocky quote or moment? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Number 10. The entire premise of Rocky, an unknown club fighter going the distance against a world champion, was written in 3.5 days. That is the figure documented in a contemporaneous November 1976 New York Times interview cited in the AFI catalog. Stallone has sometimes simplified the story to 3 days in later retellings, but the 1976 record says 3.5. The spark was a closed-circuit boxing match. On March 24, 1975, Sylvester Stallone watched Muhammad Ali fight Chuck Wepner at the Richfield Coliseum in Ohio. Wepner was a journeyman out of Bayonne, New Jersey, a bleeder known in the fight world as the Bayonne Bleeder. He had no business lasting 15 rounds with Ali. He not only lasted, he knocked Ali down in the 9th round and was still standing until 19 seconds remained in the 15th. Those 19 seconds are the literal seed of going the distance. Stallone publicly denied Wepner's influence for years. That denial eventually fueled a real-world lawsuit by Wepner. The two men eventually settled, and Wepner's story was later told in the 2019 documentary Chuck. Apollo's name is Ali, the showmanship, the dance, the patriotic theater. But the heart that will not drop, the face that keeps rising off the canvas, belongs to a journeyman from New Jersey that almost nobody remembered before this film. And while Stallone was writing that first draft, he was dealing with a personal crisis that became part of the movie too. Number 9. Before Rocky, Stallone was broke. Seriously broke. He has said in interviews over the years that he had roughly $106 in his bank account when he wrote the script. And somewhere during that stretch of financial desperation, he made a decision that haunted him. He sold Butkus his bull mastiff for $40 outside a 7-Eleven in Los Angeles because he could not afford to feed the dog anymore. After the script sold and the deal came together, Stallone tracked down the man who had bought Butkus and offered to buy him back. The price was $15,000. He paid it. The buyback cost him more than a third of what he earned as an actor on the entire film, which was reportedly scale plus back-end points. Stallone has reaffirmed both dollar figures, the $40 sale, and the $15,000 buyback, across decades of interviews and a 2017 Instagram tribute. Some early UA publicity materials played around with the specific numbers, but the consistency of the story over 50 years is part of what makes it credible. Casting Butkus in the film meant that Stallone was staging personal closure on the worst moment of his recent life, on the same screen as his professional breakthrough. When Adrian meets Butkus for the first time and the dog just stands there looking at her, two real-world rescues are happening simultaneously on screen, and the studios who saw that script were desperate for a very different kind of deal. Number 8. The script circulated and the interest climbed fast. Offers reportedly started around $75,000, then moved to $125,000, then to $275,000, with some accounts placing the ceiling around $350,000. Every offer came with the same condition: sell us the script, step aside as the star, and let us cast someone bankable. The contemporaneous Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, cited in the AFI catalog, fixed the documented offer at up to $275,000. Stallone's later retellings have extended the ladder upward, but the historical record of the early press confirms the general shape of the standoff. The key to understanding how he survived it comes down to two producers named Irwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff. They had a UA contract that gave them authority to greenlight projects below a certain budget threshold without going back up the chain for approval. That contractual loophole, combined with Stallone's refusal to sell without starring, was the path through. UA's solution was to cut the planned $2 million budget to approximately $1 million and require Winkler and Chartoff to personally backstop the risk. Every shot in this film is a film that was never supposed to exist at this budget, with this star in this form. A bigger offer and a bigger name would have produced something slicker, more controlled, and almost certainly less alive. And once Stallone was locked, the studio's imagined version of the movie would have involved 4 very different men in those gloves. Number 7. When United Artists was still imagining Rocky as a $2 million project with a name star, the internal discussions reportedly floated Robert Redford, James Caan, Burt Reynolds, Ryan O'Neal, and Nick Nolte. None of them are documented as having received a formal contractual offer. The Winkler and Chartoff contractual structure blocked any actual approach once Stallone's ultimatum was in place. But here's what makes the casting might have been conversation worth having. Rocky's power comes almost entirely from its star's specific awkwardness. The nasal mumble, the drooping eyelids, the way he talks around a feeling rather than into it. Those are not performance choices. That is a man who had been turned away from rooms and roles for years, channeling every bit of that social friction into a character who communicates through action and proximity rather than words. A movie star in that role produces a crowd pleaser. Stallone in that role produced something true. Stallone's own first creative pick for the director's chair was Ralph Bakshi, who had made the underground animated film Heavy Traffic. Bakshi turned it down because he would not leave animation. Stallone reportedly slept in Bakshi's car after pitching him. Director John G. Avildsen eventually came aboard and built the visual world of the film around Craib's photography and Brown's Steadicam work. The actors who almost played Rocky would have given you technique. Stallone gave you the thing behind the technique. And one audition still produced the film's second most magnetic presence, through a method nobody anticipated. Number 6. Carl Weathers was not a boxer. He was a former Oakland Raiders linebacker who had moved into acting and walked into an audition with no professional ring experience and, apparently, a fair amount of confidence. He read with Stallone without knowing Stallone was the screenwriter. After the read, Weathers reportedly told the room he could do better if they got him a real actor to read with. Stallone confirmed this on The Tonight Show in 2023. He stood up, Weathers tapped 3 light jabs onto Stallone's forehead, and Stallone said, "Hired." That was the audition. Before Weathers came in, heavyweight contender Ken Norton had been all but cast as Apollo. Norton withdrew before production for reasons that were never publicly disclosed. Joe Frazier appears in the film in a cameo as himself, and he later complained publicly that Stallone had borrowed his meat locker training scene and his steps run without giving him credit. Whether or not that claim holds up, it tells you that the film was drawing from real boxing culture in very specific ways. Apollo was built around Muhammad Ali, the showmanship, the patriotic theater, the dancing entrance. Weathers carried all of that without imitating Ali directly. The raw confidence he brought into the audition room became the character's defining energy. Notice how Apollo's first ring entrance plays. That is not a performed moment. Weathers walked into the audition room that way, and Adrian's casting had a completely different kind of story behind it. Number 5. Director John G. Avildsen's first choice for Adrian was Carrie Snodgrass, who had been Oscar-nominated for Diary of a Mad Housewife. Snodgrass dropped out over a salary dispute just days before filming was scheduled to begin. Susan Sarandon auditioned and was reportedly turned down for being, in some accounts, too polished for the role. Cher was discussed and deemed too expensive. The role was open, and the clock was running. Talia Shire had just come off The Godfather Part II. She auditioned in the compressed timeline between Snodgrass's exit and the first day of principal photography, and the room agreed immediately. She was in, with almost no rehearsal period. Avildsen later cast Snodgrass in 2 of his subsequent projects, a signal that the director's relationship with her survived the departure. But on Rocky, the outcome of that salary dispute produced something irreplaceable. Shire's first 10 minutes of screen time are almost entirely withdrawal. She looks at the floor. She deflects, she occupies the minimum possible space in every frame. That texture was not built in rehearsal weeks. It was built in front of a rolling camera by an actress who arrived with almost no preparation time and found the character on instinct. A different Adrian, one with more presence or polish, changes the gravitational center of the entire film. Rocky's gentleness only registers as extraordinary because of how carefully Adrian has learned to make herself invisible. Number 4, per Stallone's own account via Turner Classic Movies, Mickey was offered to or seriously considered for Lee J. Cobb, Lou Ayres, Victor Jory, and Broderick Crawford before Burgess Meredith walked in. Meredith was 68 years old at the time and had just received an Oscar nomination for The Day of the Locust. Stallone has said Meredith put an end to the whole painful process. But the casting search is only one layer of the Mickey story. In Stallone's original draft, the character was written as an openly racist trainer. That version of Mickey was present through the early rewrites. Stallone's then-wife, Sasha Chak, read the draft and hated the meanness of it. Her reaction prompted roughly 25 rewrites of the character across the development period. By the time Meredith was cast, Mickey had been transformed into the gruff but ultimately caring mentor audiences know. Burt Young, who plays Paulie, reportedly never auditioned at all. Stallone walked up to him on the MGM lot and told him directly he had to do it. Young was in. Meredith earned an Oscar nomination for the role. Young earned one too. Both were nominated for a film made in 28 days on $1 million with a cast assembled from auditions, salary disputes, and one encounter on a parking lot. And the most important rewrite of all changed not a character but the entire ending. Number 3. In Stallone's first draft, Rocky threw the fight on purpose. He did not want to win. He did not want any part of the corrupt boxing world the script described. The ending the script was moving toward was deliberate self-removal, not triumph. Stallone scrapped it in rewrites. The ending that replaced it, Rocky going the distance and losing on a split decision, then reaching for Adrian in the chaos, was shot and tested. And it still did not land right. Early test screenings showed audiences fully engaged through the fight, and then emotionally deflating at the cut to Rocky and Adrian leaving an empty arena together, quietly without resolution. The room needed something more. United Artists refused to fund a reshoot. Producers Irwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff personally put up $25,000 of their own money and packed roughly 25 friends, family members, and crew into the ring in winter coats to fake the crowd for the final embrace. That $25,000 funded the Adrian cry, the freeze frame, and the embrace that closes the film. Without Winkler and Chartoff writing personal checks, Rocky ends as a downbeat 1970s character study. It does not end as a myth. The crowd around the ring at the very end is impossibly tight against the ropes. There is no room for a real audience. Because there was no real audience, there were 25 people in coats, and that self-funded ending still needed a score that almost went to a completely different composer. Number 2, David Shire was offered the Rocky score. David Shire is a highly regarded film composer, and at the time, he happened to be married to Talia Shire, who was playing Adrian. He turned it down. Director John G. Avildsen then brought in Bill Conti, and the terms were not exactly generous. Conti received an all-in fee of $25,000. That $25,000 covered his salary, every musician used on the recording, all studio time, and even the tape stock. Conti orchestrated and conducted the entire score himself. He played piano on the sessions. The lead vocalists on Gonna Fly Now are Deetta Little and Nelson Pigford. The third voice completing the harmony stack went uncredited. It was Conti's own wife, Shelby Conti. Lyricists Carol Connors, a former member of the Teddy Bears who sang on Phil Spector's To Know Him Is to Love Him, and Ian Robbins wrote approximately 30 words of lyric total. The song is almost entirely instrumental. Reports suggest Stallone initially wanted Tom Petty's American Girl for the training montage before the rights could not be cleared. A budget the size of a single first-class television commercial produced one of the 5 most recognized instrumental themes in cinema history. The choir you hear building on the climb to the steps is not a choir. It is 3 voices, one of them uncredited, triple-tracked on a borrowed budget. Every note of that fanfare was composed under financial conditions that should have made it impossible. Number 1. United Artists originally envisioned Rocky as a $2 million film with a name star. Irwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff had a UA contract giving them authority to greenlight projects below a specific budget threshold, without additional studio approval. That threshold is how they got a $1 million Rocky with Stallone in the lead, over UA's preference for a recognizable face. But the greenlight came with a condition. They had to personally sign completion guarantee agreements, making them liable for any cost overruns. By most accounts, Winkler and Chartoff mortgaged their homes to back the guarantee, and they collateralized against losses on their other UA production, at the time, New York, New York. They bet their personal financial security on a script written in 3.5 days by a man who had sold his dog for $40. Stallone's acting fee was reportedly scale plus back-end points. 1% of gross for writing, 2% for acting. That back-end is ultimately what financed the rest of his career. The producer's gamble had no rational justification. It was conviction. The film became the highest-grossing release of 1976. It won Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Film Editing at the 49th Academy Awards on March 28, 1977, beating Network, All the President's Men, Taxi Driver, and Bound for Glory. Stallone became only the 3rd person ever nominated for acting and writing for the same film, after Charlie Chaplin and Orson Welles. Every grimy, authentically lit frame is a film that 2 men literally bet their houses on. Rocky was a script written in 3.5 days by a man with $106 in his bank account, financed against 2 producers' homes, shot in 28 days across 2 cities with jumper cables, Christmas tree bulbs, a personal pet, and a composer's wife singing uncredited. Every scene audiences love survived because someone refused to compromise or because the budget left no other option. The ending was not funded by a studio, it was funded by the men who believed in it when no institution would. None of it was guaranteed. All of it came together anyway. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie as much as you do. And as always, yo, Adrian. We'll see you next time.